everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Stephanie and this is all about my life after gastric bypass surgery. In today's video, I am going over the footage from a couple weeks ago when I went to go visit my mom in Juneau, Alaska, and some of the things that I got to do while I was there on essentially this kind of impromptu Alaska trip. Because I am from Alaska, or did the majority of my growing up there, and because my mom still lives there, I do get to go and kind of experience Alaska in a way that is different than a tourist. I get to go there more often than other people get to, so it's kind of a different point of view. But mainly what I wanted to focus on with this video is how this trip was really different for me when you compare how I traveled and the things that I did on my time off prior to surgery and prior to losing weight. It was just kind of like shining a light on how different my life is now when I look back and think about the things that I used to do on my time off before losing weight and what my weight really was holding me back from. It was a lot of experiences and it was a lot of self-doubt, and I was bogged down by a lot of thoughts that would be intrusive when I was considering what I wanted to do on my time off. And so I wanted to show you what I did on this trip, but also kind of explain how that is really different than my life prior to this whole experience, prior to this surgery and losing the weight. If you're a returning subscriber, you are maybe a little bit more familiar with some of the things that I've said in the past about how travel is different now that I've lost weight, and how, you know, my life is just changing in general. But if you're not yet a subscriber, or you want to know a little bit more about that, go ahead and follow my journey by hitting the subscribe button, and make sure you ring the notification bell so you get notified whenever one of my videos goes live. I cover a lot of this stuff now that I'm over a year and a half post-op, what my life is like this far out after surgery and how things are so very different. And I think I'll be touching on that a little bit more as time goes on as well. So I hope you enjoy this footage and a sneak peek into the types of things that I got to do on this recent trip. The weather did not look like it was going to be in my favor for the most of this trip, that there was a slight chance that we were going to get really nice weather on the first day I was there. So we decided to pack up the fishing boat that my mom and my stepdad have access to, and we decided to go out on the water. And I'm so glad we did, because it ended up being the only nice day on the trip. And my mom was super excited to get me out on the water because I hadn't had a chance to go out on the boat before. This is a boat that is a friend of theirs, and so they have access to be able to go out and just fiddle around on the water in Juneau, Alaska, which is something that we didn't have access to when I lived there. So I was so excited to be able to do this. And one of the big things that stood out to me during this trip was just the ability to climb in and out of the boat and do things that I was never able to do in the past. I just couldn't imagine doing this 175 pounds heavier as easily as I did. We went out, we were able to crawl in and out of the boat at a couple of different stops. We docked up a couple of different times, and I just had no issues. And if you've never experienced what it's like to have issues with mobility and just the ability to physically do what I would consider mundane things in your everyday life because of your weight, then I don't know how to get this across very well, because it is like night and day when it comes to my ability to do simple everyday things that are just enjoyable, and I don't have to think about my weight and how it affects what I want to do during the day. It really no longer gets in the way of what I want to do. We saw tons of whales this day. I mean, I knew the possibility of seeing whales was up there, but we saw a ton of whales, both orcas and humpbacks. It was amazing, and it just reminded me how lucky I was to be able to do this, because people pay a lot of money to go on a whale watching cruise in Alaska, and here I was just fiddling around with my family and enjoying the day out on the water, and we saw tons and tons of whales. This was a pod of like 4, I think, humpbacks that were just going right past the beach where we were. Absolutely stunning. And the sound that they make when you can hear them come up for air, and just kind of peacefully out in the middle of nowhere where no one else is around you, just listening to them come up and breathe and slowly pass by in the water was just amazing. I did see a couple of tails come out of the water during this trip, which was super cool. And I did catch one whale breaching way early on in the trip, but I didn't catch that on camera. And it was the only time I saw it the entire time. But again, in different places, we docked and kind of boated around in several different places and saw so many whales. This one was waving to us. We had to stop and just soak it in, because I mean, how often do you really get to see that? And this is something that, you know, not only am I just very privileged and lucky that I was able to do because of what my family has access to right now, but also it's, again, something that physically I may have really struggled with in the past. And that's really what I want to hone in on for a lot of this trip, was how I was able to just enjoy myself and the things around me and the privileges that I had without thinking about my weight. I can't stress to you enough how much my weight had always been on my mind with almost every activity that I ever did, whether or not it was in public and I was concerned about what other people were thinking or viewing me like, whether it was just physically, whether or not I could do something or I could fit somewhere. Those thoughts ruled my life, and I was really able to notice during this trip that that was no longer the case. So we stopped off at one of the islands and looked at some of the really old stuff that's on the island, old dilapidated buildings and things left over from way back when that are just sort of historical pieces left on these islands. I believe there was a cannery here in the past, is what they were telling me. This was, again, something that was really, really exciting for me because I hated going for walks. I can't stress that enough. I felt like it was a chore to go out on a walk and like just explore around me in the woods. I was bored. I almost always was bored with what was going on around me, and I couldn't ever be in the moment because, again, I was thinking about my weight, or I was thinking about how badly my feet hurt most often when I was walking around, or, you know, just being physically tired from walking from one place to another. Those things really kept me behind. So not only being able to do this, but having the desire. I was super excited to get off the boat and to go wander the woods and see what was out there. None of that was something that I thought, oh, maybe I won't be able to do this, or maybe I won't, you know, want to go explore. I definitely have noticed a huge difference in not only my ability to do those things, but my desire to do them. I don't second guess anymore. I not only don't second guess whether or not I want to go for a walk, but I find myself wanting to go and do extra things and go extra steps, or go up to random places because the fact that I can go and explore and see things that weren't available to me before. So it was really fun to be able to kind of explore this island. The old buildings and the old framework and stuff was really cool to see, but also on the beach itself, there are a lot of interesting old pieces of machinery and equipment and bottles and glass that are just scattered all around this beach from way back in the day. And especially this day when we went, it was a very, very low tide. So we were able to see a lot of different things that is normally underwater. And it was pretty cool to just kind of see the remnants of history scattered along this beach in a way that you normally can't see if you're just going and visiting. Axles, spark plugs, random interesting fossil looking things. There were all sorts of really interesting bits of stuff all over this beach. And it was really fun to wander around. Also, because it was low tide, there were starfish everywhere. I kind of had to watch where I was walking because I didn't want to accidentally step on a starfish, and they were absolutely everywhere all over this beach. So I wandered around on the beach for a little while. Again, because the tide was so low, we basically had to climb down the dock. It was at such a steep angle because of the tide being so low that we all went down sideways and had to really hang on because it was such a steep angle. Going up was much easier than going down, but that was quite an experience. I've never actually experienced something like that before. The rest of that day, we docked at a public dock. We just sort of drank some wine and enjoyed being out on the water and camped out on the boat and on the dock for the rest of the night. And then the next day, we went out to go collect the crab pot. That's something that I thought was really fun. I was very excited for crab. I love crab, and ever since surgery, seafood has sat extremely well with me. So I was really excited for possibly getting some crab out of this trip. But unfortunately, every one of them was too small to keep, and we did have to toss them back in the water. So I didn't get any crab that trip. It's just an excuse to go back again for some fresh seafood next time. But it was still something that I'd never been able to do before. And so it was really fun to be able to experience. Juneau has a very robust, very amazing drag community. And I have quite a few friends from college who are involved in a lot of the drag shows that go on. And I was very lucky to be able to catch one of my friends in a drag show while I was there. If you haven't experienced not only the downtown life in Juneau, but going to some of these drag shows, I highly, highly recommend it. One of the days that we were able to sneak out when it wasn't really all that rainy, I did get to go out to the glacier. This is the area that I was talking about before that has the hike that you can actually go out to those glaciers. It goes out on the left-hand side of this footage, and you kind of climb out to the glacier over that direction, and you can find the ice caves, which are no longer ice caves anymore. Unfortunately, they did collapse with all of the rapid melting that's been going on lately, but I still wanted to hike out to the glacier, but we just didn't have the weather on our side for this trip, so we postponed it for another time. So we decided to go out to the waterfall instead. So this is Nugget Falls, and it was raging this day, partially because of the weather and the runoff and just everything that's been going on. It was really, really, really heavy this time around. So that was a pretty cool experience. It's a very easy kind of stroll out there, but you get this amazing view of the waterfall and you get to be right up next to it. Also in the area, they do have other kind of boardwalk areas where sometimes you can see porcupines or you can see bears, and unfortunately we did not see any additional wildlife on this trip. I was really hopeful. Actually, I was most hopeful to see a porcupine because I really miss those little suckers that sneakily look down at you from the trees. I really miss being around those guys, but no porcupines and no bears, unfortunately. So then we were able to do our mountain climb. We climbed up the backside of Mount Roberts, and it's something that's been on my bucket list for a very long time. This hike goes basically straight up the mountain, and what you typically see is tourists who will take the aerial tram from the docks where the cruise ships are, and they'll go up the mountain, they'll see the sights, they'll take pictures, and they'll go back down. But what I've always wanted to do was hike up the backside of the mountain and then take the tram down as kind of a reward for your hard work. So we knew it was going to be tough, and we were able to find one day when it wasn't raining that we said, you know what, today's the day if we're going to go ahead and do the hike. I believe it's about a 7-mile hike. something like that. But that's round trip if you go up and down the mountain. So really it was only like 3.5 miles, I think, but it's very, very steep and goes straight up the backside of this mountain. You're also scrambling over rocks and roots, and it was quite a bit muddy. That was something that was warned about, that it could be quite muddy because Juneau is a rainforest after all. So it's very rainy in that area all the time. So we went ahead and did it anyway. It wasn't too difficult to go through. That's something that I found very interesting, was that I did not find this hike to be as difficult as I thought it would be. I'm not going to say it was easy. I definitely was huffing and puffing for a good chunk of this hike, but I didn't feel like it was as difficult as the last time I tried to climb a mountain. So I'm either getting better, which is possible, or this trail was a little bit easier, maybe broken up because it wasn't quite as steep and switchbacky as the last mountain that I tried to climb. One of the things that we noticed is there was a lot of maintenance on this trail. A lot of these log steps that were created at some point, but they've washed away over the years, and so you really have more of like this weird horizontal ladder situation. So they weren't really all that helpful as steps, which is what they were originally intended for. There were also some fallen trees and a few things that we did have to maneuver around, but overall a very well-maintained trail and very easy to traverse. With all of the routes, it kind of made it basically like stairs. It was almost like climbing stairs for a good chunk of this hike to get all the way to the top, because there were rocks and there were roots and there were things that I was stepping up on. So maybe that's why it felt a little different than the last one that I had tried to do. This only took us about 2 hours to do in total, going up just half the trail to the very top of the mountain. Technically, actually, it's not the very top of the mountain. I think there's an extra mile that you can take to go to the very, very top summit. But we just went up to the visitor center where they have the restaurant and the gift shop and things like that. So 2 hours. It was overcast and a little bit foggy in some spots on the mountain, but we had great weather. We didn't get rained out, and it was just absolutely gorgeous. I can't tell you how proud I was after doing this hike. I don't know if you guys have a bucket list item that you've always wanted to do physically that maybe you just didn't have the confidence that you could accomplish, or you just physically could not do it at that point in your life for whatever reason. It feels so good to put my mind to this and to do something that I always thought would be fun, but I just never thought was actually something that I could accomplish. Not only being able to actually do it and say I could and I did, but having that ability to manifest that, to say, I want to do this and I'm going to make it happen. Not just, oh, it would be nice to do this while I'm in town, but making it a focal point of my visit. This visit was very much about a lot of the physical things that I wanted to do in town, weather permitting. And that was really different from the other times that I've ever visited places. Most of the time it's about the food that I'm going to eat or the people that I'm going to see. And yes, this was very much about visiting my mom and spending quality time with her, but this was also very focused on what I wanted to do physically and how we could fit that into the trip based on the weather that we had. That's a different way than I've ever really approached any sort of vacation before. I do not always look at the physical activities that I want to do on a trip. And that's how I'm starting to look at a lot of these trips in the future. We're planning a trip to Ireland next May. That's actually been in the works for years now and got postponed because of COVID. We were supposed to go in 2020, and as everyone knows, nothing happened in 2020, but that is in the works to happen next May. And I'm approaching that trip so different than I ever have in the past. Being able to think, hey, what do I physically want to do? What are some hikes or some experiences or things along this drive and along the way that we want to be able to fit into our schedule. I just never really thought of things like that before. And that's not to say that I didn't go out and do things on trips and vacations, because when we did go to Europe, you know, I wanted to see as much as I could, and I pushed myself to the limit when we were in Europe so that I could see all of the sites in London and Paris that I wanted to see, and I didn't want to miss out on that. But I was in a lot of pain doing that because I pushed myself harder than I really think that I was able to do. I don't have to worry about that anymore. So now I get to pick anything that I want to do and anything that I want to see on a trip, and just make sure that I have time for it, and just make sure that I can, you know, make it happen within the parameters of the trip. I don't have to worry about how am I going to handle this. Something that I experienced in the past, for example, when we went to London, was the fact that I was exhausted going through the museums. I really wanted to make sure that several museums were on our list to see. And going and seeing things in a museum is not difficult by any means. It's just not. But my feet hurt so bad by the time we got to that type of activity on our trip that I was having a really hard time focusing on the really amazing artifacts around me and the really amazing things I was able to see in the museum, because I was looking for the next place that I could sit down and give myself a break. And I don't get that feeling anymore. Even after doing this hike, my feet didn't hurt. The bottoms of my feet didn't ache, and they didn't swell, and they didn't feel absolutely miserable. And that has opened so many doors. I can't wait to go to museums in the future, because now I'll be able to wander the museum and really actually enjoy what I'm looking at, and not in the back of my mind be thinking, oh my gosh, my feet hurt so bad. Oh my gosh, when can I sit down? This is so embarrassing. There were so many times in my life that the thought was going through my head that this is so embarrassing that I can't get through this without taking a break. And it really bogged me down with what was available to me in the past when it came to just enjoying my free time and my trips. I work really hard, and getting that free time, getting that time off to be able to go and travel, it takes a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of finagling my schedule. And then to just feel like you don't get the full effect from it is just, it's disheartening. So here is a great view of the trip down. This is sped up. This does not go this fast by any means, but it's still only about a 5-minute trek all the way down the mountain, and you can go see where all the cruise ships are docked, and this is where the tourists all go onto the tram to go up and down the mountain. But this was my reward for being able to climb this mountain. How amazing was that? This was definitely the highlight of this trip. So then we took a stroll along downtown Juneau. It's something I haven't done in a very long time, and went and got fish tacos at one of the places downtown to celebrate our hike. It was absolutely delicious. The last day of my trip, we went to my absolute favorite restaurant in all of Juneau. It's a pizza place. It has the best thin crust, gourmet, amazing pizzas that I've ever had in my life, and you cannot go to Juneau without eating there. It's just forbidden. And so we went ahead and went for drinks and pizza to kind of round out the trip. And that's something that is totally doable after surgery. People think that you are never going to be able to eat the same, you're never going to be able to enjoy your life or to enjoy trips. And that's not the case. I was able to go to my favorite restaurant. Does it look different? Yes. I can't eat nearly as much pizza as I used to, but that's okay. My mom and my stepdad had tons of leftover pizza. I was still able to eat what I wanted to and got a taste of the things that I loved. And I was able to go ahead and have a couple drinks and just enjoy myself and my last day with my mom. One of the things that I have to do differently because of surgery, though, is that I have to have any drinks that I'm gonna have before dinner, because it's just not feasible to have any drinks afterwards. I have to wait 30 minutes after eating to be able to drink anything. And what I've noticed, especially if I'm going out and celebrating and having a meal that I don't normally have, is I usually have to wait a little bit longer before I feel like I can start drinking water again, let alone alcohol. And so what I have noticed is if we are going to do that, where we go out for like drinks and dinner, I bypass any appetizers. It's just not something that you can fit really in your system unless you're eating only appetizers, but that's a different story. I have a couple of drinks ahead of time, and then I'm able to enjoy the dinner. And that way I can still have drinks and dinner with my family, but I just can't do them at the same time. It's just not really something that you can do after surgery. Oh, and I threw in a little bit of footage here of the Juneau airport, because if you've never seen a tiny, tiny little airport in Alaska before, this is it. This is the entire airport. It's so funny if you're not used to that kind of thing. It is so small, and it only has, I think, 3 gates total in the whole airport. So I thought you guys might get a kick out of that if you've never seen something like that. So there was my trip. That is pretty much everything I was able to do during the trip because the weather wasn't on my side. So I did a lot of just hanging out and talking with my mom and enjoying her company as well. And that is perfectly fine. That was what the majority of the trip was really for anyway. But I'm glad I was able to sprinkle in some of these things and really experience life in a way that was totally different than what I was used to before surgery. It really was a shining light for me at how different my life is becoming and what I'm able to do now, and what just doesn't even faze me anymore when I'm thinking about these things. It is, like I said in my last update video, it's very freeing to be able to just live your life and not second guess your abilities or second guess what you can or should do if you're going to fit somewhere or if you're going to physically be able to handle something. It feels so freeing to just say, I want to do this, and then do it. That felt amazing. So thank you so much for watching. I hope this was a fun little insight into what my vacations are like now and what kinds of things I get to enjoy nowadays, and really reaping the benefits and the enjoyment of losing 175 pounds. I mean, it's just night and day. So make sure you stay happy and healthy and always look at the big picture, and I will see you guys in the next one.